Welcome to the Unstructured Podcast. In this episode, I talk to performance apparel design leader and former pro snowboarder, JJ Collier. From snowboard to sewing machine to leading design for brands like Salomon, RLX by Ralph Lauren, Spyder, and more, JJ and I talk about what it takes to design high-end, high-performance gear and how to channel your passions into designing an authentic life. I'm Michelle Rose, and this is Unstructured. This episode was brought to you by Struktur Society, the community for creators in art, design, and music. For almost a decade, Struktur has brought together creatives from across the industrial, apparel, graphic, and sound design industries, building professional relationships, creating a platform for knowledge sharing, and raising the bar of product creation. From live events and workshops to publication and podcasting, Struktur continues to evolve to build the strong creator community needed to craft our future. Find us at structursociety.com and subscribe to our Substack at structursociety.substack.com. Why does your dad's upbringing get so emotional for you?
Oh, it's just kind of this unbelievably tragic 30s. You know, he's born in 34. Lost his mother in the 40s, or in the late 30s. Dads didn't take 4 kids. And so the kids were taken away from the dad. And my grandfather basically imploded, and just this tragic idea of my dad. Sometimes he's with his brothers and his sister, and then most of the time they're not. And sometimes it was good, sometimes it was terrible. His stories are unbelievable, but he'll sit there and laugh telling them to you because he just can't believe how crazy some of the stuff was.
Yeah.
But he decided to, rise above it, go to the boys club in Charlestown, Mass, and start boxing so he could deal with the toughs in the neighborhood. And then it's Bowdoin College, and then it's the Army, and then it's Vietnam, and then it's Airborne Ranger, Green Beret. So that let's do a whole second podcast on me trying to live up to the ninja in my life, who I adore and love so much and respect so much. My parents are awesome. But yeah, my dad's story is pretty unbelievable. His experiences are crazy, but to sit down with him, expectations were very, very high. It's probably part of the reason why I mentioned being a bit of a square earlier. It was, for me, it was certainly living up to some level of expectation, even though it was mostly unspoken. We just, we love the guy and we want to show well.
That's so great. It's so great. So many of us kind of deal with our parents or, issues of anger. It's always nice to hear the stories of, somebody else's difficulty and you're respecting that. You're feeling that, because I can tell also from what you've been able to do that your parents were really, like I said, supportive, trying to be that. I've got a son who's 11 and trying to let him be who he is and support and give him experiences,
Unbelievable there. I mean, John, theoretically, you look at my dad's resume, it's like I should be going to West Point or something. And no, there should be this, Forrest Gump, there should be this legacy of I have to go and now be a lieutenant colonel and, go airborne. And instead, no, my parents were both outstandingly supportive and just wanted us to be who we wanted to be. And, my mother is this, and I've got these amazing pictures of her in the 70s wearing my dad's fatigue shirt, tied at the waist. And I'm these things mattered. They impacted me. She saw things and feels things in fashion, just taking crazy chances. I remember she bought these crazy Bolet sunglasses that were tiny, these weird little tiny, something you'd wear in a tanning bed. And I'm come on, Mom, with the glasses. And then Sean Palmer shows up wearing the same, that Ace Tahoe snowboarder I mentioned, legend, wearing the same glasses a month later in the magazine. I'm like, all right, you get a hall pass on that one.
Yeah,
She's like,
yeah. Your
but
mom, your
she always saw the Matrix before anybody else.
yeah, your mom, your parents have something there that really impacted
Big time. It's
your
huge.
design.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Good stuff.
I want to dig in then about I want to kind of go back to the sewing machine
Yeah.
and um getting that first job, like deciding that, I'm a designer now.
Right. Yeah.
And how did you just decide that you get a sewing machine, you start to do stuff, you decide you're doing this, and you get a job with Salomon, who, when you hear that now, you're like, wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not as much back then. It was, yes, it was. They're smaller, but they're different now. But
Yeah.
how did that happen? How'd you get that job?
Well, just to go back just a little. So we had wrapped up. I was again trying to leave. I'm done snowboarding. I'm retired. We moved back to North Carolina. I attempted to go to school. Shannon and I moved back to North Carolina for to hopefully go back, get some in-state tuition and go to school. And I'm 28, it's like, am I really going to go back to school? But I tried. And we're in there somewhere. I'm standing around J. Crew working retail, going to school part-time, no money. And I'm like, forget it. I'm going to drop everything. Shannon was working for ESPN. So she's making a little salary. We could get by. If I dropped my part-time hourly job at J. Crew, we might survive, and so but I did. I dropped everything and I sewed for like 6 straight weeks. I imagined, kind of envisioned a collection, and I had a fashion show and then basically opened for business the next day. John Collier, designer, got a little bit of press and people started calling, and I started to get a little bit of business from people who, I want this thing, I can't find it. And so I started making one-off garments on my little home machine in Charlotte.
What were you making? What did you start selling your first
Fashion
things?
stuff. The first thing I did was a pair of pants for a guy. The next thing was I did a few dresses here and there, a few skirts. And the last thing I did, and Salomon called in the fall of 99. And I was sitting there sewing a wedding dress, which would ultimately be my last project for that particular era. When they called and started inquiring about, wanting to find their way in apparel and find their way in a way that was as iconic as the monocoque ski and the rear entry boot, something that shifted thinking in the market.
Okay. So you're in North Carolina.
Yep.
Where were they based?
Well, there was the Salomon Design Center in Boulder was where the call came from.
Okay.
But they're based in Annecy, France.
Did they know something about you from?
So this is where snowboarding sort of circled around. So I don't know who threw my name in the hat first, but my name came into their sphere 2 or 3 different ways, as I understand it. Possibly from my good friend and top mentor, Brian Johnston, who was at Salomon North America at the time, possibly from people who knew me from Spyder. And then from one other friend from North Carolina, potentially, who was doing footwear design for them. So yeah, so it catalyzed. The show was the catalyst initially, where I went to bed a snowboarder with a sewing machine and woke up the next day in my mind as a designer, because I was open for business.
Yeah.
So that was the switch. But yeah, Salomon was a game changer.
Yeah, because they were all hard goods, and
They had been, yeah.
Here, and people don't always know this, but I've known that with some other brands as well when they start to wanting to go into apparel.
Yeah.
And it's a whole other ball game.
Oh yeah.
Doing an apparel manufacturing business from hard goods. And so, and having people who can do that and fit that and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is a big deal. So.
Well, and it's so funny. We thought the market was saturated then. It's like, and these were again, Michelle, these were words I did not know how to use, but, we were looking around and of course I was thrilled. And sort of famously now, call your family lore. I was busy with my little projects and said, thanks anyway. And my new wife at the time, asked me to please call them back and see if I can maybe get the job first before I turn them down.
Basically, they were looking for you. They were offering you the job, and you were saying no.
Well, they weren't quite offering me the job yet, but I got a call from this guy, Rudolf Errett. I'd never really heard a Swiss German accent like this before, so I was trying my best to like understand what he wanted. But the message was they had not found their way yet. They had a great team put together. They knew they wanted something that was new. It couldn't just be another Burton or another North Face, but they hadn't been able to pin that down yet. And so, but I literally did say, well, it sounds really exciting, but I'm doing fashion stuff over here. So, best of luck. What a dope. And so Shannon was like, hey, let's play this a little differently. So we did. And so, so they flew me to Boulder, and I did these epic drawings, like for me, really, really different drawings than I'd ever done before. And it went well.
What an opportunity. Oh my God.
Insane. It was just insane.
Yeah. Like, what was that like for you then there? Because talk a little bit about the state of the industry. We're talking what they hired you in 1999.
I moved back to Colorado, oddly enough, in October 99 to start at Salomon.
Okay. And what was the state of the industry like? And what was the state of Salomon? I mean, you're in the U.S. office. It's a brand that's based in Europe. Yeah. So what was the industry like at that time? Kind of give a little snapshot.
Well, I mean, good question. Remember, I'm an ex-pro snowboarder focused on Vogue magazine at the time. Like I don't use I'd been a sales rep for years at this point. I'd had 3 winters and 2 summers, or maybe the opposite. I think 2 winters and 3 summers as a tech rep. Ride, Bonfire, Yakima, Camelback. Like I was in outdoor stores talking to owners and buyers and going to sales meetings. So thank God I had that little bit of understanding and empathy, I suppose. The empathy took form later, but just at least some understanding of kind of how things work. There's a calendar and there's sales samples and stuff like that. But like otherwise I was green as grass. So to come in and talk about the market, I don't know if North Face was hot or flat at the time. I don't know if they were a reference in 2000 or if they were having a moment or not. Burton, how was Burton doing in 2000? By then, Ride and all these other cool brands and Bonfire was nipping at their heels. Like people were doing really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I could have sort of given you a feeling of what I was seeing that I thought was interesting with small brands that were coming up or whatever. But knowing what the skiwear market was like, I was there to design it and bring new ideas to the table with an amazing team and with a very cool team of athletes. But I wasn't in the position where I am sort of now, where I can really talk about not just what has been happening, but what I think will happen.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear your take on it too, because it makes me transport and, overlay. Where was I at that time?
Yeah, exactly.
I went back to school myself at 28 and got my design degree.
Wow,
so
cool.
I was in school.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
cool.
that I did go back to school and do that. And then I started to study business around then. And around that time, in early 2000 is when I got hired at Columbia Sportswear. I was just learning the industry myself. And I know that right around the 2000 was when the North Face was almost going bankrupt. So
that's what I was wondering. Yeah. I was wondering if there was a dip.
Yeah. And they kind of rebounded, and I joined them in 2007 when they were on that upswing.
Got it.
But yeah, so for me around that time, I was just learning the outdoor sports industry for the first time. And so, I'm always curious about where was everybody else? What was your experience in hearing? Because we were all just in it, whatever point in time or wherever we were. I was in Portland at that time, and we're all just experiencing it. So I love hearing other people's stories of where they were and kind of putting together, where we all were, because we've all crossed paths in these ways and overlaid at different brands, and connected at different times and had interesting. I even had, Janome sewing machines. I had a different sewing machine when I was growing up, But right around early 90s, I was doing some of my own sewing, and Janome Rep, his kids were in my martial
Yeah.
arts class that I taught,
Oh,
and
no
he
way.
asked me to do some stuff for some Janome ads and whatnot. And I actually did a video, and I did it alongside a young guy who was a snowboarder who had a sewing machine in his van, and he would make snowboard gear,
Oh, that's,
and
yeah.
that was probably my first connection with somebody making snowboard gear around me. So,
Yeah. And well, and there were people doing amazingly cool stuff. Obviously you mentioned Trent and Troy earlier. Twist was so ahead of its time and so iconic and awesome. Troy and I were actually just talking about it yesterday, just some of that, the early art in it was just so culturally perfect.
yeah.
For its time period that it's kind of hard to imagine the stars aligning the way they did. But yeah, that was really neat work being done.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
lifestyle and the culture are the big are
totally.
the things that was all built around. And
Yeah,
every time we talk about snowboarding, that's
yeah,
where we go with that. I want to move into France now.
yeah.
So you
France.
ended up going to France with Solomon.
Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, 9/11 was a big day, and
Oh,
that was something that I think impacted the leadership in France, where they're like, okay, we don't know what's happening, like, the economy, all the stuff. And I think so finally, it was time to sort of call back some of the crew. I think this is all accurate. That okay, we're gonna grab a handful of team members from Boulder, shut that office for a number of different reasons, and luckily I was one of the folks chosen to go and keep the dream alive over there with what we had started in Boulder.
pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. Got to move into France with a 4-month-old is really interesting.
Whoa.
I recommend it to any, or moving to a foreign country. France was actually, I mean, you can imagine how epic, how just unreal it was to be over there. It was just one of my, I'd do it again tomorrow. Like I loved Annecy, but
Yeah.
it was stressful to have like a job that I absolutely loved and that I protected tooth and nail. I needed it.
Yeah.
Here I am going to be about to be a new dad. I really needed the job.
Yeah.
Nobody knew me from Adam. I had launched one collection. I didn't have much of a CV yet, so it was absolutely critical to me. Again, and just grateful every day for the Salomon experience, and to
Yeah.
get to extend it into NC was absolutely just so cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I bet your wife loved it.
We really did. It was a magical era. I would love to go back and tell my 32-year-old self to chill the hell out, like enjoy this,
Totally.
dude. It's gonna, like everything's cool. But it was a weird time, it was just post 9/11. It was freedom fries. It was idiots breaking their French bottles of wine on the ground because of whatever the hell was going on with, the UN or whatever. And Iraq, I guess, at the time. So it was kind of a weird time, but the French people were just so amazing to us. Like we had the most unbelievable experience there.
That's great. And then you're there and you're in France and you get an opportunity presented to you, a dream opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know. I'd been there about 6 months. I'm sitting there working away at my desk and my phone rings and it's a recruiter from Ralph Lauren.
Yow.
So I had, in my fashion dreams probably started with Armani, but really became real with Ralph when I really started to pay attention to a more natural inclination for me, like working for, I didn't think of it as working for Polo. I thought of it as working for Ralph. Here's my real hero.
Yeah.
And so they called and it was the same sort of thing as Salomon almost. They're like, our Lex is very interesting to Mr. Lauren. We sort of tried it one way. He wants to try it again. And we're trying to build a team. And we see that there's a point of view at Salomon and we hoped you would have a conversation. And so I'm like, oh my God, like I'm at my desk.
Wow.
So, again, so grateful, so grateful to and sort of loyal to Salomon. And here I am, the dream call comes.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of say, I can't right now. I'm sorry. I just got to France. Like I'm here for a 2-year deal. I'm 6 months into it. And so I was able to hold them. We had a few conversations. I wasn't going to not pursue it, but I just couldn't pursue it right then.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was able to hold it off for, I think, about a year before they were like, okay, it's a little bit now or never. Cause we'd met, I'd interviewed,
Ah,
it
mhm.
was by that point, it kind of happened. Um, and so, and here again, almost a 2-year-old, Shannon's pregnant, 9/11 still very much on our minds. And I'm going
Yeah.
to move everybody from the Alps to New York City. Okay. And it was
That's
between that and Arc'teryx. There's a whole different Arc'teryx early valence concept discussion there that I was having with Jeremy Gard. And I just sort of had to, it was an impossible decision between two dreams, really, because Arc'teryx had been was so rad at the time. And this opportunity to launch lifestyle with Jeremy was my other choice.
wow.
I had to go work for Ralph.
The choice of this is a choice of riches here. Like when you
Oh my,
have these out when you're like right at the beginning of your career and it's
yeah,
burgeoning
yeah.
and they come calling. I had that as well around a similar time, and you're just like, oh, and you have to
I
make
know.
choices that are hard.
Never taken
Um,
it for granted. Yeah, it was a hard
yeah,
choice, but my God, talk about a first world problem. I mean, I
yeah,
was so grateful. I couldn't even believe that these were my options at the time. There was a third one too, but those two were the ones that where I was down to like having to sit there on the hillside in France and just distill it, for a while. Like, what do I do here?
yeah, and your family had to follow you around with this.
Yeah, yeah, all of those things were important, but ultimately, like I had to go to polo.
Yeah, so you don't regret the choice.
No, certainly not. And I'm very happy to see what has ultimately happened with those original ideas that, Jeremy was talking to me about in '03, about what he
Yeah.
wanted to do with lifestyle. And I hope it's gone the way they wanted it to, but yeah, I had to go and do something else.
Yeah, it's so you did. What was it like to meet Ralph?
It was amazing. I met him the first time I flew to New York, which I think was a good indicator of the fact that they really were interested in me. The fact that they were
Right.
getting Ralph time is hard. And so I guess I was definitely on a calendar. I don't think it was as off the cuff as it kind of looked in the moment. Now that I think about it,
Mhm.
and it must have been a bit planned because getting Ralph time is hard. Even when I worked there, we didn't get that much Ralph time. But when we did, it was solid gold. But to meet him that first day was just unbelievable.
Why do you think you got it? I mean, was it where was RLX at that point in time and what were they wanting to do with it? So
RLX had
clearly
been
this is
it had been mostly a wholesale program. So
okay.
it was, and so they had reps, they had a mountain bike team, they had a thing, they had some really neat product.
Mhm.
When I came back, when I came in, it was the beginning of sort of a phase 2 to go brick and mortar, completely control the story, pure statement across the board. No other brands mixed up in there where the Navy's not right,
Mhm.
like, or whatever. Like
Right.
there was no way to feel successful with a Ralph Lauren brand like that going wholesale and not having any control over it.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was all about taking the control back and making a brand new statement at Ralph Lauren
Yeah.
stores.
So that's why you got Ralph time because he needed
I
to.
think it was very important to them to
Yeah.
secure the creative they wanted for that next phase. Yeah,
Yeah. That's when some things are riding on your shoulders.
it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. And the a bit like Salomon, the ideas that I was able to share later for what I wanted to do, we took some of them one to one. Like, so
Mm.
there are, there are things in the Rivoli like coffee table, retrospective of his work that I did, that basically we took over one to one from my hand sketches. So it was really exciting.
Nice. Nice. They gave you a lot of trust in what you were doing.
Yeah, and that well, we mentioned that the carte blanche sort of thing earlier. I mean, I had a tremendous team, tremendous leadership, lifelong friends, unbelievable experience. And like I said, I was learning a lot, but some of the raw ideas really struck a chord. Yeah. So we
Mhm.
fine-tuned them, but in some cases it was damn near one to one, just like, here's what I want to do. And we did it.
And then you had to live in New York while you were doing it.
Whew. Yeah.
Super different than every other place you'd been.
Oh my God, it was just, and with with littles and Shannon pregnant, it was with my son was 2 when we got there. And so, yeah, it was really challenging. Um, really challenging. Like I was just not wired for NYC. And I did most of the time that I worked for Polo was remote. So most of the time that I spent in New York was by myself
Oh,
for,
wow.
5 days at a time, flying back and forth from Boulder. Back to authenticity. Like that was my spin. I'm like, guys, you want me to do this stuff? I need to be somewhere I can wear it. We're doing the uniforms for Aspen. I'll be closer to Aspen, so I worked mostly remotely for Polo the whole time I was there.
Oh, that's
And
good.
it just made everyone's life better. And I didn't like being gone all the time when the boys were little, but they were home and I was there. And when I was there, I could, work around the clock and it didn't bother me. It was fine. So
That's good.
yeah, it worked out great. Yeah.
So this led to joining Spyder.
Yeah.
And you're talking like, we know Spyder for high-end ski, which makes sense after RLX. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Being the athlete that knows the gear and whatnot. The gear, high fashion now. Like how was this leap for you to go to Spyder? And was it hard to leave RLX and go there? Like what? Yeah, talk about this transition.
It was hard. It was hard because I loved my team and I loved what we were doing. I mean, working at Polo was really my dream job. There are a lot of my colleagues who are still there. There are a lot of people who are 20, 25-year people at Ralph Lauren, and I'm not surprised. It's a great place to work. You work hard, but it's amazing. I just need mountain roads and snowboarding on the regular basis. I need space. I love New York, but I'm not meant to live in New York. No big deal. Any more than New Yorkers are meant to live in Boulder and be bored to death. So, so it's like,
about knowing yourself, man.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So, but like you mentioned earlier, you got to know when it's time to go. And I was starting to see this evolution, 5 or 6 years of like Formula One programs for Ralph, where we could do whatever the hell we wanted. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, it's time to turn that into some commerce. And so it was a little bit, okay, time to come back to New York. And that happened to coincide with me realizing that it probably wasn't my brand anymore, or it was still my brand, because I was seeing an evolution toward, remember, what I wanted to do was fashion. So there was starting to be this opportunity I'd already started to do some work for Black Label. We had started to tiptoe around Purple Label. So if I wanted to go back, it was probably an opportunity to have that fashion career that I wanted. But I had a 15, 20-year plan I'd worked out already, before even coming to New York. And that involved Boulder and racetracks and cars and mountains. And like, so the fashion, I had to choose between the fashion kind of career executive, like epic Ralph Lauren job that I wanted, versus the lifestyle I wanted, and chose lifestyle.
You chose the lifestyle.
And sorry to answer your question, lifestyle, that choice happened to coincide not only with the right time to maybe leave RLX, but also when Spyder was had a new management team, and again got wind of through friends from past. I think when I rode for them, I think it was my friend Phil who dropped my name in the hat initially, where it was like, you got to meet JJ. He's in Boulder. He's got the right CV for the PE guys, and it was and we also all happen to get along. So Tom again hired me to come and be the VP of product and design for Spyder.
And some epic product.
Well, we really had an amazing run. Yeah.
And that was a really strong time. I think when you were there, when were you were there in the mid 2000s, late?
To late. I suppose it was December 2009 to July 2015.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was because Spyder was always one that I looked to, especially when I was learning skiwear in my earlier days as well, but always all the way through, through my corporate career, which spanned up to about 2015 until I went independent. So always loved the gear, always I love the look, the color palette. It's really bold. It's very aggressive. It's really very rock and roll to me in a lot of ways, but it is very race car. It is very...
Well, it's near and dear to David. That's what the references are for the founder, and David wasn't there anymore, but I knew the DNA so well. And I think this is why Tom hired me. I'm like, I get it, Tom. Like I grew up wanting this stuff. I understand the aspiration, I understand the aesthetic, and I understand not to fuck it up. Like I will bring you the new one. It's like when Porsche brings the new 911. I've made this analogy many times. You know it's a 911.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but it's also visibly the new one. You know, no one has to tell you what it is. And so with Spyder, I kind of came at it that way. I'm like, I know how not to screw this up. This will be Spyder, but it will be visibly the new Spyder.
And you have to have that attitude with it, because it can be really, it can either be very scary to try to reinvent what's good, or it can be, for some people, very boring. You know, having had to reinvent a lot of classics for brands like the North Face for myself too, it's like you have to have that right blend of, I can do this, I have ideas, right? It's like, I know this, but I have ideas to make it better.
Yeah.
And that takes the confidence.
But no, but the punchline though, here though, you asked earlier, was it hard? And I turned back the clock 15 minutes. It was hard because I was a designer. Like, that's it. I had 2 people on my org chart, barely at Ralph Lauren, very talented people who were like, yes, they reported to me, but they, you know, we were collaborative and it wasn't a classical management response, you know, a relationship.
Yep.
I show up at Spyder and I've got 25 people on my org chart all of a sudden, and they are under me. And like, so dealing with that whole thing and was absolutely the hardest part. And one that I wasn't, I was neither adequately prepared for it personally or, well, let's leave it there. There are things about those early days that I wish I had known to do differently. And I either wasn't paying attention, or I was too absolutely overwhelmed with making this first collection happen the way it needed to on an impossible timeline to stop and do what I should have done in the first few weeks, just in terms of the staffing thing. I think it worked out okay, but boy, learnings upon learnings.
You know, I have an experience with that as well. And I think I find it interesting, especially in maybe it's like this in other industries as well, but having a very strong design management background, meaning management of a design process and product and a vision, not of a design team or people, a whole production team, right? It's a very different thing. And I think a lot of designers end up in those roles without being prepared.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
It's a different type of skill set.
Yeah, truly.
And I've seen some people rise to the occasion, and I've seen some people fall. From that.
Well, I think I did a bit of both there. I mean, I think there were definitely highs and lows where, you know, I've joked around before about not being a particularly great manager historically in that way at that time. But being, I hope, quite a good mentor to people and, you know, being so grateful for my opportunities that when I saw opportunities for others where they were really had high capability and really had high, drive and critically had a good attitude. I saw, you know, I would do whatever I could to make sure that there were opportunities, and there were many of those at Spyder. It was great.
What would you say, hindsight, that, you know, because I've heard you talk about that difference between, you know, being a good mentor and managing. Would you have anything hindsight to say, like the difference between being a good manager and being a good mentor, and maybe some things you could have done differently, or maybe just there's something else you prefer, you know?
Well, this will be horribly embarrassing because I think anyone who's a good manager will listen to my answer and go, dude, really? Like, you didn't do that.
I don't know. They might get some insights from it.
But again, I think I made assumptions about what people knew about me, which I don't think was enough, quite frankly, and knew enough to trust me, you know? Everything was so fast paced. And it was a lot. And what I should have done was, instead of slipstreaming into the social side of things and getting to know people in the way that I knew how to get to know them, I should have taken a step back and said, you know, I'll catch you guys a little bit later, but next week I need to have one-on-ones with everybody, you know? And I'm not a power tripper at all, ask anybody. But in that role with that many people, it would have made sense to really sit down and do not the casual one-on-one at the trade show or the bar, but the really like, who are you? What do you want? Tell me your story and get to know them really professionally instead of just, holy crap, ski industry full throttle, let's go to ISPO, which is basically what it was. And so, and I don't, and I'm sitting here like, I don't think there was enough known about where I was coming from to understand why I had the role that, quite frankly, a few other people thought maybe they were entitled to, or not entitled to, sorry, that they would have wanted, and I was hired instead. And so you get off on a weird foot. These were talented people, but there was a reason why I got the gig.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually really insightful, because not only are you talking about, I'm gleaning things from this as well and thinking about my past experiences, because I think many of us, there are a good handful of us, I'm sure, who've fallen into this and had this happen, because you have companies that are hiring you because they need somebody to drive great product and sales. Right. And they need that piece. And that at that time tended to trump the taking care of people. It was still take care of your team. Yes, we want a strong team, but the first priority was always, we got to have great product. We have to have a lot of sales.
Trust me, I knew what I was being graded on. And I always I feel like I always took care of people, but just that fundamental first early foundation of, manager or team member, like just initial setup was where I just didn't know how to do it right. That's as simple as that, but I cared instinctively and fundamentally about the human. I just didn't have the skills yet to set up the, let's say, traditional relationship. And I'm not really there to be a mentor. I became one because it's not what I'm hired for. Yeah. I became one because, like I said, I care about the people, but I don't know if I left there any better manager per se, but I learned a lot about what I wanted to do next. And I did add those tools to my toolbox later, but
I do think that the things that you just shared about, the one-on-one, getting to know them, but also sharing yourself, that was a piece I probably left out as well. Especially when I was managing a larger team, of sharing more of myself and being more open. Absolutely. And so there's something to be said there, so people can see where you're coming from professionally. Yeah. And there's more of an open exchange. I just don't think I remember my mentor and boss, she was saying that, she goes, she had kind of taken away the management role for designers at Columbia Sportswear when she was there. She said not very many designers are actually very good at being managers. And
I think that's true.
And I also just don't think they get the training, and
we don't. Yeah, we don't. And that's why earlier I said, let's leave it there, because it's my responsibility. I knew I was going into a big job. I can't put it on anybody else that I didn't take a minute and go, okay, maybe I should talk to somebody who's managed 25 people before, because I haven't. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. I was moving from, or not moving, but wrapping up work that I was doing to go and I was leaving for Ralph Lauren. I was moving into this new job, and I'm getting a look at calendars going, wait, we got to do what? Where are you in the design phase, and having concepts and things that I didn't want to adopt, and having to start from zero on a ridiculously short timeline. Yep. So I'm not too hard on myself about it. But I am certainly capable of recognizing how I would have liked to have done it differently.
Yep. I'm right with you on it. This episode was brought to you by the Functional Fabric Fair, powered by Performance Days, the premier trade show for performance fabrics and materials. Since 2018, the Functional Fabric Fair has been providing a unique, highly curated trade show experience in the performance materials space, aimed at providing customers with the very best options to create the highest level products in the market. Having a strong focus on education and sustainability, the Functional Fabric Fair is committed to tackling the biggest issues we face today in regards to product manufacturing and our environment. With 5 shows throughout the year from Portland to New York City to Munich, you're sure to find what you need at the Functional Fabric Fair and Performance Days. Around 2020, it was a huge amount of shifting, just a barrage of shifts for everyone, right? And it's still going on. It seems to be no end now. You started shifting a lot before that. So around 2016, you left Spyder to head up design at Aught Design here in the Bay Area. And in a role that I almost took, it was a different role because there are different roles for different people, that I almost took, and for my own personal reasons, really wrestled with and chose to go a different direction. But I love the company and I love the people. And I actually really think that the role that you took, you were the right person for it, and you were the right person for what they needed. And that's how I love seeing how things work out for that. And then eventually that's how you and I got to meet and connect was through that. What was behind that change? And what was it like going to a brand that was, still technical, but more tactical than like snow sports and fashion oriented?
Yeah. Well, if we look at 2015 real quick, we were just starting to see the beginning of direct consumer, of e-com. I mean, Ralph Lauren had been doing it for years. It was their biggest door, for example. Like e-com was really important. So that was starting to happen. Brands were starting to just barely dabble, right? But at the same time they were starting to dabble, Sports Authority goes out of business, like we're looking at our other big players and going, okay, if Sports Authority can die, then what else can happen? So I'm like looking at big picture, the stuff I wasn't paying attention to when I was 30 at Salomon, I was now, really, really attached to, because I owned my business at Spyder in such a different sort of way that I was just looking at the world and the market and the bottom line differently. And so it would have made sense to go from SVP of design at Spyder when I left to like use that and flip over into Nike or maybe Under Armour at the time or whatever. And instead it made sense for me. I'm looking around and I met Brett and I was having this conversation. I started looking at Aught and I'm looking at what appeared to be a perfect example of not only the new model of what was happening in the world and, where it was like made in USA weekly drops, knowing a lot of your customers' names, like it was wild. And then I'm online looking at it going, oh my God, I've never seen men respond this way to a brand or talk to each other about what they're wearing. Like it was totally different.
So much passion.
So much passion. And then, and then to meet Brett, like Brett's just insights on things are so, as they're just really one of a kind.
Yeah.
That he really got me. Like I was like, okay. And some of the other partners they're just amazing. The other key partner at the time, I should say, solid humans, people I really could see myself working with. And it was an opportunity to come in and be a chief design officer and be a part of a business in a way that I hadn't been. The big part is the made in USA. Okay. So here I've had for 20 years, basically, or not 20 years at the time, sorry, 12, 13 years, carte blanche, like to maybe not always creatively. Like we certainly had a ton of freedom at Ralph Lauren because of the era. Spyder had a ton of freedom as long as I was nailing the markets and the reps were happy globally. But like mostly carte blanche from a production standpoint, where it's like, if I could dream it, I could make it. And we did a lot of that at Spyder, like trying to come up with new, arguably too often stuff at Spyder led me to go, it was a lot of lost sleep. And it was a result of my, temporary psychosis from sleep deprivation, coming up with a lot of really rad ideas. But if you don't have the factories to do them, you can't do them. And we were asking unbelievable things of those factories, and bless them, they came through for us.
Yeah, the resources at those big
we're insane, bottomless. You think you can do it.
Yep.
And so I get to Triple Aught, and the carte blanche comes to a screeching halt because we're doing things stateside and things that I had completely taken for granted in every way. I was being pushed back on, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, are you kidding? This is elbow articulation. What's the big deal?
Yeah, right.
And in fact, it was hard, and it was hard to adjust to that. But once we did, and once the factories gave a little and I gave a little, stuff like that, and they saw that we were doing something genuinely new and interesting that did push them and could be good for all involved, like we wound up coming to some of the, I mean, clearly the best, purest product I've ever done. My favorite, some of my most favorite product. I have favorites from every brand, of course, but like that, those restrictions, the constraints of US made at the time led us to like beautiful, lasting, really, really pure product that I'm super proud of. And so the end of carte blanche actually was an amazing, beautiful thing in my life, as opposed to a challenge. It turned into something really, really awesome.
Well, it's like the energy shifts into another direction. As soon as you don't have one thing, you open up in another area, right?
Yeah.
And I know with Triple Aught, it's an interesting thing because it can take a longer time or more prototypes, more attention to getting the product just right, but you can drop it more often.
Right.
That directness to the customers and direct feedback. It is a very different business model.
Oh, that was insane. I mean, when did I ever had feedback aside from after stuff got to the store? Or you get sell-in feedback, but very rarely like finished product. What did a consumer think on those historical wholesale timelines?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, yeah, you're right. You get to Triple Aught, you drop it on Friday, and you get feedback on Facebook in public as soon as the first customer gets their box.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
holy moly.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, it was really good feedback, but talk about like a change for me, like
probably very brutally honest feedback.
Well, it was. And like I said, luckily, most of the time the feedback was really great. People were excited, and it was like, wow, what is this? A denim jacket from Triple Aught, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I get it, and there was certainly critical feedback sometimes, but the point isn't necessarily the feedback, and it was the fact that I was getting it in real time on a timeline that I never experienced, like feedback.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
awesome.
what were some of the biggest opportunities that you found there, maybe that you weren't expecting?
Well, for starters, a Triple Aught is, if you open the website, you go, oh, okay, tactical brand, but it's not. It's not 511. It's not the classic, like black cargo pants, like tactical brand, the way you would think of one. It's not that. We do black cargo pants, yes. I still say we. No, I think of the brand as like family kind of thing. Yeah. But really the opportunity, it wasn't about that. Like of course, we've got a bunch of ninjas, SEALs and stuff who wear the product. Awesome. That definitely drew me to it. It drew me to it that we have federal agent, FBI guys and stuff wearing it, because that's back to my boyhood dreams of like,
yeah, completely.
And also of doing important work. Let's not forget that, John, my dad called in airstrikes. I design jackets. There's a part of me that wishes I was doing more meaningful work. We can talk about that later. So to get to associate with guys doing the meaningful work, for me was also really cool. And the fact that they loved this product and wore it every day created opportunities for us. You don't wear cargo pants with knee pads every day if you're working in any sort of environment where you don't want to stand out, where you're the guy who nobody wants, you don't look at me, I don't want you looking at me. Yeah. So when I got to Triple Aught, it was an opportunity to move past the stuff that they were already very good at doing, fleece and amazing, let's say tactical product for a moment, into like, what is this? What are the other guys wearing? What are they wearing? Like Triple Aught had already started to do denim. And so the guys trying to blend in a certain city who were total ninjas, like you didn't know they were, but they had all their kit. It was all organized, because the jeans they're wearing look like jeans, but they actually had, business in the front, party in the rear, as I'm fond of saying.
Yeah,
Stuff
totally.
going on with those jeans you didn't know about until the guy started reaching for a magazine, a rifle magazine. And it's so, but moving forward, it was like, okay, what do not only those guys wear the rest of the days in the week, but what do we want from Triple Aught?
Yeah.
What do I want if it's US made and I get to spec the best chambray or the best twills or the best denim or the best wool? Like, what do we want with, or what are the guys who never want to look technical there or anything like that?
Yeah.
They still appreciate made in USA, epic quality, like deep consideration into feature set and finish.
Yeah.
But it's a button down shirt. That's a tremendous quality. Like that's when I got there, that's when we kind of reinvented the bigger picture of what Triple Aught could be.
It's a full lifestyle, because you're dealing with people you're dealing with customers on the human personal level, and what else do they want? Who are they? And you're trying to outfit for that whole, because I always think of also like when I look at Triple Aught, it's a lot of it to me is very, I don't want to say it's lifestyle. It's because you can pull it into your lifestyle very easily.
Yeah.
It's absolutely performance functional pieces, but at the same time, you can still just wear them out on the street.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. But even a fully natural fibered, like I said, like a button down shirt or a t-shirt, there's always a little something extra. And that's where, for me, again, we opened with authenticity. We'll close with authenticity. This is like, this stuff has to really be real. It can't look like something that's designed to do something. It has to be really pure and just highly functional first. And I think we did a very good job of combining functional with like elegance, for lack of a better term.
The Triple Aught customer holds the brand to it.
That's true too.
When you have the kind of customer that is willing to fly in once a year for a big warehouse sale, and take part in events, tactical events and whatnot, it's a community. I mean, Brett and the team have put together a very cool community that makes amazing product, and it's hard work. It's not easy for them, and it's
oh no, it's nearly impossible. Like I always joke around about talking people out of launching apparel brands, even though they're paying me to help them do it. And it's like, I mean, I'm very serious about it. This is not easy. I've dreamed of having my own brand for 30 years and I still haven't done it because unfortunately I know a little too much now. And luckily it's the best time though to do it. The idea of trying to be Ralph, I wouldn't ever dream of doing, but there are other ways to do it now that are tremendously exciting where I can do what I wanted to do without having to like bet the farm.
Let's talk about, this is kind of an all in, talking with Brett at Triple Aught. It's like these, he's very committed, that they're very committed and they've been doing it a long time. And you have to be all in and super committed and super passionate. Now, kind of as we move into this piece, into present day, I just kind of want to go, skip stones over, where you are now. After Triple Aught, you went to VF for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you, because VF went through all, especially with the North Face moving, and they went through a lot of shifts. COVID happened. And then you went to Life Labs, which is, I believe, a startup.
Yeah. Just no risk, no reward. Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to see what are some of your thoughts about, this is kind of a broad question because what's going on is we have these massive rapid changes. Technology's changing so much. AI is coming into it. We're all talking about social media and all of our headaches with that, and trying to manage our own careers, with this volatility that is probably not going to let up. It's becoming the new normal. I wanted to see what is your take on that, and how it's impacting you, and how you're navigating your way through that.
Well, before COVID, I was already studying this stuff. Like it was post Triple Aught, but before the COVID landed, though I was looking at everything. Like if we're trying to build, I'll just take it weird for a second.
Okay.
I need fabric, because for the moment we have fabric. If I'm going to go outside, I need to put fabric on my body. Okay. It needs to fit the basic shape of the human form and do its job for protecting me in those conditions, whatever those conditions are. Are they cold? Are they wet? Are they mist? Is it wind? But the idea of having to, no one says it has to be stitched. No one says it has to be anything. It just needs to fit the criteria that I outlined earlier and be desirable. So I was trying to go really deep there and step way back from it and be like, okay, what is the next generation of getting this body covering?
Yeah.
If we take it down to the basics, it has to be more than a poncho. It can't be a piece of fabric with a hole in it. Okay. Like it has to be
We have
like
ponchos.
yeah, so we
Right.
have ponchos. Yeah. So
Right.
no, so if I was thinking about technical product and how we go forward, like I was just doing a lot of thinking at the time, and that far out dream of like, I can't stand on a pedestal and have this thing sprayed onto me, and as it dries, it swells so that there's ease. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound particularly clean or desirable either. You know what I mean? But just going
There's a
outside.
whole slew of problems after
There's a whole slew
probably
of problems.
washing that off and
But just getting the daydreamer, like going back to like the basics, like what if we were starting from zero is sort of my question now. And I love sewing machines, but sewing is hard and teaching people how to sew is hard. And yet using machines for it totally and not having jobs anymore is kind of a downer. So it's like, how do we elevate craft? That was one of the things that like made me so happy, even if it's just a dream. Like, how do you take sewing as a concept out of the factory and as a factory job and make it something that's like you're really genuinely proud of and that you're paid appropriately for, and you take pride in it again, the way we do when we sit down and make something. We're not, okay, I curse when I sew all the time. It's hard, but like I take real pride in what I made at the end because I know how hard it is. So that was one of the main things where I was like, okay, first and foremost, if it is sewing because sewing works, how do we bring some real pride back to having a sewing job, But then it was all about other things, just about these constructions and using, glue. I'm a huge fan of the team at Bemis. Like, guys, what are we doing? Like, is it easier to teach somebody how to glue than it is to teach them how to sew? Like stuff like that. Like, what's the next generation of building garments? Because we are going to need them. But I want to find new ways forward,
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, what is, and this is beyond the future of like, because there's so many factors to look at in the manufacturing, but what is the future of apparel design, as a job, as a role? Because for a long time in my career, I mean, any of us as apparel designers, especially in the technical and performance, having a job, finding a new job was not hard. It was quite easy. There was only a few really good experts at this.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a shift in that from at all ages, all levels, as companies shift and products shift, and we're making fewer, better things and whatnot. And when I think, just like you, when I was growing up, there wasn't really apparel design programs in school. There was fashion design, right? There was fashion, but my fashion design education did not prepare me for performance design. I learned that on the job, and I used some of those skills from a fashion design degree. A lot of the people I worked with didn't have any education or degree in apparel design. That's very common back then. And then we started having very intense degree programs of all these different types of apparel merchandising, product accessories design, lots of different levels. And we're seeing less need for all of that as much as we did before. What is the future of apparel design? Like, how is it shifting? What do we need to look at beyond what you were just saying?
I hope it's more young people buying sewing machines and heat presses and making their own stuff. I mean, I really do. Like, as basic as that sounds, and I'm so grateful to the universities that I've worked with over the years who've presented great students and ultimately team members in many cases, who are doing more than just, croquis and fashion, but who are actually, students understand seam tape and understand Adobe Illustrator when they get to your doorstep. Thank you.
Yes.
CSU and more recently USU has an outstanding program like Chasing the Gap. They're doing great work.
Great
So
stuff.
they're preparing people for technical outerwear. I mean, this has been the era. This has been the last 20 years of X Games and snowboarding the Olympics. And like, there should be so much excitement around building technical apparel. And yet I still don't feel like I see quite as many candidates who are like hungry to do it. It's kind of strange, actually. But going forward, like, I love this idea. There will always be big brands. There'll always be the necessity for giant stuff, but I would love people to think like it's a village as opposed to a metropolis. Like what matters to me and my little group of friends, followers, customers, and just build what matters and not have to make stacks of anything go away because we just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Smaller scale and the craft of it.
Yeah, and then everything's special. Like you're way less likely to throw something away that the person who made it. Even if it's not in style, even if it's super, super cutting edge streetwear and it's out of style, you're less likely to just get rid of it if you know the person who dreamt it up and made it happen for you. So there's just some basic, again, maybe it's a naive, like sort of idealist sort of view, but I don't think it is. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of this like craft mattering,
Yeah. I
bigger than Etsy, smaller than VF.
Yes. I do think it's been coming for a while because craft, always kind of comes back because people need to work with their hands and they need to be local and they need to connect with each other. And that's where we're at now.
Yeah.
Well, on the other flip side, we have virtual reality, and I've seen, some of the people that I've known have started working on virtual products.
Yeah.
Designing products that there will never actually physically be made.
I love that. I'm a huge proponent of that. I really believe in 3D. I'm working on some product that's about to drop soon that I can, that I knew just enough Clo. In fact, I did it this way. I was like, I know Clo just well enough to do this pant, but I want it to be conceptualized in such a way that almost anyone could sew it too, so it's kind of cool. I design anything with a pencil, but like to sit down and my limitations within Clo, I could get just this far. What really led to an interesting, reductionist, but smart reductionist, really like, it feels like a little bit of a master stroke, this thing. I hate to say it, but I'm so proud of this thing that I took from one thing that I sort of was traditional and into something that's totally not traditional, and used 3D to build the initial patterns for it. And now it's a functioning thing I've been testing for 2 years. It's absolutely awesome. So
that's so cool.
But this idea of building things that are purely digital and you sell them to a stylist once and then they go away and nobody gets hurt. Sign me up. No, seriously, like that is so cool. That is so cool. Yeah.
And people haven't, 3D, designing in 3D for apparel has been something that has been very slow to take off because it's very difficult. I have engineering parents, so I grew up drawing, 3D and architectural drawings and whatnot. It's a different mindset. It's easier to do that, but boy, the Clo and the other 3D programs that are out there, we've been waiting for them. It's just they're very difficult to get the fabrics.
They are, but it's different. I think your parents would have said if they'd been at a drafting table their whole life, they would say Illustrator is difficult. But if you started with Illustrator, the way I'm thinking of one of my team members right now is an absolute ninja. Former team members, ninja in Clo. She knows how to use Illustrator, of course, because she came in midway, But when you know Clo and when you start to see the matrix there and it's just second nature, it's unbelievable. And, of course, the Fabricant and some of these other design houses are it's black magic. I don't know how they're doing what they're doing. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
It gets wired into your brain.
Oh, it's so sick. Yeah, it's totally. I don't know how much we'll see it applied, yet it's hard to imagine how much people will spend for clothes, for their avatar, for their, for their, alternate life kind of thing. But, but the idea of just even for social and stuff, to just be able to do something and show it. And here I was at the Met Gala, but I wasn't really there. Like that kind of stuff is sick.
I mean, I hate to say for being judged. My son, my 11-year-old son who loves VR, he spends probably half his life in that space, has already designed clothes and gone to trade shows inside,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Awesome.
has friends. I mean, their brains are getting wired for this world.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
And I've said to him, I said, you're going to be the one that really starts to design this world and make it something, because he's not going to not live in it. We can easily go, well, VR, I can take it or leave it. I know how to live outside of that. It's so important to them and their community that they're going to continue to grow it.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm grateful for it too. I mean, just that we have to kind of embrace it. I mean, look at how it saved our kids' lives during COVID and stuff. Like, imagine if we barely had an Atari. Imagine being stuck inside for 6 months. So I'm super, super grateful to all of that stuff. And I do believe in it. It's just, you're right. I hate to say it, a little bit generationally, it's hard. I still value being outside more than anything else. But the idea of, and of, experiences that for me are real world, even though I love gaming, I love motor racing online. It'll be a minute before we figure out to what extent we go from real world cut and sew to buying half of my clothes online to wear online on my avatar. It's like wild. It's going to happen. I mean, it's sure to pop, but we've been talking about it for 20 years. And I think, we'll see where it leads.
Yeah, we'll see. So what do you see for Collier Brands? And, where would you like to put your focus, your experience now? We're talking about mentoring and helping the next generations and whatnot. That seems to be kind of where we're at, is not just how to pass down, but how to lead in a different way.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. Like nothing's the thing that I'm the most grateful for, unbelievable experiences and travel, and certainly a degree of pride of seeing my work on the mountain or on the street or whatever, but the ability to have had opportunities to provide opportunities to others has been for sure the biggest takeaway for me. If I could wake up every day and do 3 mentoring sessions with people and have that be a part of my income, let's say, I would do it. I would love it. It's so fulfilling to me. It's so fulfilling to me that I do it for free. It's like, but if that could be a part of my actual, daily regimen and life, I would love to do more of that. And because I think it has mattered to people.
Absolutely.
But as far as brand and the work, today I consult across multiple brands, and I love that because I mentioned earlier this staying interested in it and loving it. And as hard as it is, why not learn something every day? And, recently I've had a couple of different projects where it's like, wow, I've never worked with this material. I don't know where to get it. I am going to have to find a factory, stuff like that, but it's product I've never done. So, and so you're looking at new feature sets, I can do I could launch a new ski brand tomorrow. And I really believe I could bring something brand new to market that would be compelling. The market doesn't really need it, but that didn't stop Montech from showing up and turning the industry upside down with a direct consumer brand that people are buying and loving. Yeah. But I don't necessarily want to start a ski brand tomorrow because I really know how to do ski and I love it. But these opportunities to do some of the things I'm doing now that I wish I could talk about are awesome, because they're brand new to me. They challenge me again. In terms of my own product, it will be all about that model I outlined earlier. It's smaller than triple Aught because I know too much, I know I know how hard that is, but the opportunity to make a really pure statement in the market of what I believe and the culmination of 25 years of tremendous care and interest and curiosity and still trying to find new ways forward.
Yeah.
That's what Collier will be about when you see it.
Yeah. That's the thing that strikes me, in talking about your whole pathway in your career is not just the constant reinvention, but the constant curiosity, the constant learning, the constant awareness of of as you're gathering experiences and realizing the knowledge that you have, but looking forward and going, oh, but I haven't done that. I haven't done that. That's interesting. Let's try that. Like, and that's a lesson down to everyone, behind you, that you always keep that, that curiosity. That's what keeps us young. That's what keeps us growing, as opposed to like,
Oh
I'm
yeah, for
here
sure.
now. I'm going to sit on the top of my mountain and just tell you all what to
On
do.
the contrary, like, right? Absolutely. On the contrary, like you dream of getting to this place in your life where you have enough freedom to actually flex
Yeah.
and not worry about what it is. This, am I on market? It's like, no, this is my pure statement. I think I'm on my market. That's what I want. And I believe that those people are out there who like appreciate, I always talk about Nigel Caborn and Errolson Hugh acronym being on totally different ends of the spectrum. But if you appreciate quality and you appreciate vision and you appreciate execution, you can appreciate both guys, even though their work is completely opposite of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're entering a new phase of what is important to people. What the market wants is changed a lot, and and I think in the right way. I think if as long as we tackle it and keep going and do what we're doing on this more human level. Kind of the last question I have for you is our community question of what do you think we need to build community among the creative industries, among us as all of us as creatives? What do we need to kind of galvanize our community and drive these new ideas forward?
Well, I would love to see I wish we were together more. Like honestly, there are awesome events. There are big ones. We're all going to see each other in a few weeks at Functional Fabric Fair, and that's great. But just on the daily, I think about this a lot in Boulder. It's like, why am I not sitting in a room more often with people from my space? Would be great, but really all over. Like,
Yeah.
and I've even thought about trying to do something about it in Boulder here, where it's like, I wish I was sitting in a building with an artist and a metal worker and, me and a couple of folks that I work with, whether they're on my team or I'm on theirs. It's like, like that kind of dynamic, the daily dynamic, especially after 3 years of Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh my God, like a little FaceTime together is great. And I've always, when we've had virtual teams, as soon as we could start to meet in person again, it just made so much difference.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to figure that out, especially when so many of us are hired guns. Like it can be a bit lonely, doing your thing by yourself or remote so often. And so I would love to find a way to get together more on the regular, like a traveling road show of, people you don't know from South Carolina who are going to be passing through Boulder. It's like, oh my God, let's do this, like let's make it happen on a more regular basis. I do really miss that.
There's an idea right there, and I think you're speaking to the fact that so many of us now are, I don't know, say hired guns. I mean, we are, but more independent, and I think that's going to be more and more the norm since we all can be as well. But the isolation and the inability, or the less chance to connect, we have to create them more, which is what we are working on doing. With Struktur Society, and the podcast is one way to just connect without actually physically connecting and sharing the story, but still meeting at certain events, wherever those we've committed to, wherever there is a creative community gathering, we should be there and having a place to gather as a starting point. And like, let's see where it needs to go from there, because everything has shifted. How we run events, how we go to trade shows, what trade shows exist, how we meet up with our teams at jobs, that's all changed. And so we have to reinvent everything, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, we're doing our best, right?
Well, we are for sure. And I think we, as creatives and people who care about this work, I think we do a pretty good job at like finding ways to come together and communicate on the regular and share. But I think there's the next level down is getting that sort of level of care to consumers. Because it seems like the thing that's missing the most is like, there's all this great marketing being done. And at the same time, I still think there's an opportunity to help people understand more deeply why we care so deeply about what we do.
Yeah.
And why to invest in better things, like we were saying earlier. It's like, I really think that's the biggest opportunity on the market level. Is, how do you make them care? That's people who've worked with me have heard me say that a million times, but how do you get people to care about what we do as much as we do, so that they'll enjoy it and experience it the way the creatives themselves do? Because it matters. I really think it matters.
It does. And nothing replaces the in-person experience.
Yeah.
Connecting with the product, with the people that make that. And so that needs to happen, because people are what matters. And the reason we make product is for the people and to make things better.
True. It's not for us. I mean, I know I said earlier my market is me or whatever, but it's like, that's a pure statement in something that's very, very personal. But the outcome should still be that whoever gets involved has this amazing experience,
Exactly.
So so I think that's our next big opportunity, and it's right there. It's so obvious to me. So how do we tackle it?
Well, I got chills with that. It's right there.
Sounds fun.
Where would you like to put your focus and experience, today and going forward into the future?
Well, I think the main thing is that it can't just be about my career anymore. I'm so grateful for all this. Like I've said 10 times, I mean, this industry's been wonderful to me. And I think despite all our challenges, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't try to find ways for others to have an experience with this industry the way I have, and to allow us to keep designing, whatever form that takes. Like, we can't have the challenges of the world or the economy or whatever stop us from being creative. So, let's find a way forward. And I mean, of course, this is a business. Hopefully it's a collision of art and commerce, but it is a business. So we have to find ways to make money from it. We have to survive. And I want to be a part of finding ways to do things differently, do them better, do them in a cleaner way, but make sure that others have the opportunity to enjoy working in this industry that is hard, but one that we love so much,
Yeah. And what does that look like? What are, because there are so many platforms, new ideas, new ways to do that. What does that look like? What could that look like?
Well, I like the idea of things being smaller, but effective, efficient, profitable, and, meaningful in some way. Like, nobody has the perfect balance figured out. I always say, when I'm talking about sustainability, working, like when I was, leading these sustainability efforts, it's like we have to applaud any effort, but this is one area where more is more, you have to keep pushing, you have to keep evolving and leveling up. Yeah. So, I feel like there are opportunities in how we speak to the consumer. I feel like there are opportunities in just starting with the desire to not waste, instead of the historical desire to just make more,
Yeah.
And I think you can be profitable. I think you can make really lasting, beautiful product. But I think if you're very careful and don't let it get out of control, you're able to do those things and do them in a smart, clean way that, where again, everybody benefits,
Yeah. Yeah. And getting, I think personally, I feel like the next generations, the younger people, they're coming into this industry and any work industry with a whole new mindset. Of what's important to them. It feels like they're born into a more dire world. There's more at stake. More things are urgent, and they have a really fresh view on things. Like, they have a lot of energy. I've found as we all get older, we get a bit more jaded. and try to maintain that positive. And those of us who are forward future thinking really have a tendency to kind of latch onto that hope and positivity.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's 100% true. And I'm keeping it, again, back to that sort of awareness of how people are doing as a parent or as a friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I try very, I don't feel like it. I try very hard to be tuned in to how people are doing. And I have to say, like, for all of the stuff that we're dealing with right now as a world and as humans and all of that, I see so much exuberance and hope and like amazing energy. It's why I love hanging out with people of all ages, because you know, I do see so much optimism and you know, keep the dream alive, like clinging to the dream, like doing whatever it takes to, like, you know, find that joy every day and whatever form it takes. Younger than me, older than me, like, I have to say the energy feels pretty good out there. But when you get down to brass tacks, the nuts and bolts of like, which brand do I want to go after, you know, and then if I get in there interviewing and all of that stuff, that's where I feel like I do have a lot to contribute. And so I try to pay that stuff forward as often as I can. And, you know, just another, not parting thought, but a little bit full circle back to you, like we are all brands. We all really are. And that doesn't come naturally I don't know that everyone necessarily gets it, how important it is to like treat yourself like a small business, you know, treat your messaging like a small business, because it's kind of product. It's definitely messaging. It is definitely consistency, you know, and then trust. And like, that's the same if I'm selling leather goods on Etsy or if I'm trying to, you know, find my way into a big company or find my way through any company, you know. Those things are critical. But it's so funny, hate to say it, the product's important, but there's a lot of great products, so you really have to ace all your other bits as well.
Yeah, really nicely said. And when I talked about, you know, you already having that brand identity, I think that that's something about knowing who you are, who you want to become, what you stand for, you know, what drives you, what you're passionate about. Those are the things that all brands have to do. And it's what each one of us has to do, because when you come into work for any company, whether you're starting your own, working for yourself, or you're working for somebody else, that's really important. People want to know what you stand for. Not like you said, there's a lot of great designers, there's a lot of great product, but when it comes down to it, it's who you are as an individual that makes a difference, because you're completely unique.
Right.
And I think that comes through in your whole life story, you know, from banner elk to snowboarding to cars to, you know, your dad in the military, and like all of it, all the way through fashion. You know, you see the through line, and you see each shift is an addition, and it starts to make up the bigger picture of JJ Collier and Collier brands. And I think it's a great example for other, you know, especially younger designers and anybody of any age to look at and to follow. Is look at inside you, what's in your heart, what do you love, and you create you know, that for yourself around you, and that creates your brand.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, I think this was central to our getting together for this, is just to talk about how much is changing that's outside of our control, and how much of that is just really natural evolution in some way, whether on the individual level or on an industry level or whatever. But, you know, a lot like product marketing, you know, there's so much of this stuff that we do as an industry, any industry, where it's like, hey, look at what our product is and how great it is, instead of like remembering that this is for somebody else. And it's like, and speaking to how that thing will benefit the, you know, the actual audience, you know. And so I've had to similarly kind of evolve the messaging. It's like, it used to be about going out and talking about, I was asked to talk about it, and then talking about what I do as a designer, you know. And lately I've totally had to pivot and bounce over here and, you know, think past the pocket, as I've sort of been fond of saying, and share and, you know, be visible. I really haven't been visible at all. And on social and stuff, I've totally had to pivot and go, okay, it's not about me talking about how great this particular design is, but instead it's JJ Collier as the thought leader and bringing the historical experience into a new light, not for my benefit, but hopefully for whoever's watching, asking them how they're feeling, how they're responding to things. And if they believe that some of the things I think are important and not that I need them to, but is this a cool conversation we're having, And I love that stuff, because we can talk about design all day, but I'm so much more curious about what makes people tick.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with the behind the scenes, the hidden.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I started Struktur to begin with, was to bring all of us who are behind the scenes out to the forefront a little bit more, to pay more attention, to connect and see, the contribution that we all were making through the eyes of each other, that maybe we knew or didn't know or couldn't tell the impact we were making. And so to bring that forward and be able to, bring ourselves out forward, especially us Gen Xers, but we're very much behind the scenes. We want to stay humble, and realizing that coming forward and showing yourself is not about ego. It's about sharing, and it's about helping others and connecting with others.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're speaking to. And when the wonderful videos that you've been making and posting about your experiences or your product or just what you love,
it is different though, to do the talking head. Was really a departure for me. I'm like, oh gosh, because I know sometimes I scroll right past this stuff. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna do the talking head thing. But I hoped that enough people knew that my approach to apparel design, to oversimplify, was hopefully a little different and hopefully interesting enough that that they would want to give me a few seconds of their time on the sort of the theoretical stuff as well, because I consider them both equally important. It's hard to have one without having thought through the other.
Yeah. Well, I love seeing it, and the response I've seen has been great, nothing but positive. And I've heard people say more of this, more.
Yeah, I know. And I really, God, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that too. So I just feel like that's an important piece of the Collier brands as a business going forward. And so, it's just really exciting. As a closing thought, I mean, honestly, I feel like we've only just begun. I talked a little bit earlier about what if we were starting from zero. And I think that's really a good way for people coming into this to come at it. There's a lot of great rules. I love the rules and the classical experiences and proportion and all of that. But what if we were starting from zero? Yeah, that's great. It's a great place to start. It's a great place to end. You have been listening to Unstructured, the podcast from Struktur Society. If you enjoyed this episode, please download, share, like, subscribe, and add your thoughts and suggestions in the comments. Also, please consider a Substack paid subscription to help us bring even more meaningful content and connection points to you and our creator community. Here you will find articles and news, as well as the podcast and additional content. We cannot grow without you. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.